Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Wall Street Journal Report. I'm Maria Bartiromo. A bold move by the Fed, a standstill in Washington, and the fiscal cliff moves ever closer. My conversation with the man behind the no tax increase pledge. What Grover Norquist thinks will happen next. And is he a big loser in the latest negotiations? Then creative thinking, why companies may be looking for that art history or English major instead of an engineering one. The Wall Street Journal Report begins right now.
This is America's #1 financial news program, The Wall Street Journal Report. Now, Maria Bartiromo.
Here's a look at what's making news as we head into a new week on Wall Street. The Federal Reserve goes where it's never gone before. At its meeting this week, the Fed's Open Market Committee announced a new target that it will keep interest rates low until the unemployment rate hits 6.5%. That's the target. That's the first time it has linked employment to interest rates. The Fed also announced a plan to continue buying $40 billion a month in bonds to keep interest rates low. But of course, the big news was about those jobs.
The conditions now prevailing in the job market represent an enormous waste of human and economic potential. A return to broad-based prosperity will require sustained improvement in the job market, which in turn requires stronger economic growth.
Meanwhile, it was the fiscal cliff that really drove markets. The Dow Industrials broke a 5-day winning streak on Wednesday and then continued to fall on Thursday on worries over the fiscal cliff. The markets continued down on Friday. Americans are still shopping, though. The Commerce Department said retail sales rose in November by about 0.3%, rebounding from a fall the previous month. Consumer spending, of course, makes up about 70% of the U.S. economy. If you've been missing the Google Maps app on your iPhone, you should be able to find it now. It's been 3 months since Apple replaced Google Maps with its own system. That was not nearly as popular and not nearly as good. Google, though, released its free application this week, and it's expected to become one of the hottest commodities in the App Store. A bold move by the Fed, seemingly no moves at all when it comes to the debt ceiling and the debt issues. Two big stories we're covering. What do they mean and what happens next? Joining me right now is Bob Nardelli. He's former CEO of Home Depot, former chairman of Chrysler, and founder and CEO of the private equity firm Accelerate. Bob, good to have you on the program.
Thank you. It's great.
Thanks so much for joining us. So as a businessman out there, what's your take on this fiscal cliff issue? I mean, how do you think these negotiations end?
Well, I mean, there is so much speculation out there and such a broad range of opinions. I guess if I had to predict, I would say we probably will not reach agreement, and there's a high probability we will we'll go over the cliff. And the impact of that, the repercussions, I think, are catastrophic.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, and we hear this from everybody, you know, that if we go over the fiscal cliff, it's going to trigger layoffs. It's going to trigger the possibility that the economy goes back into recession in 2013. But the rhetoric, again, is ratcheting up between House Speaker John Boehner, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Even though Boehner met with the president again this past week, they're stuck on their sacred cows. How do you think it impacts business? From your standpoint, what are you hearing from some of your clients and business colleagues out there?
Well, again, I think there's quite a broad range of interpretation on this thing and perspective. It's interesting, I attended a CEO conference in Washington with CEOs, and there's a great amount of trepidation and conservatism about the future. I was on the West Coast and attended this strategic growth forum where you had 2,500 entrepreneurs who were blowing and going, you know. But again, these are individuals who are generating about $1 million to $10 million to $25 billion. But the core CEOs, I think, are very concerned about the future and being very cautious about their investments. I think you're starting to see announcements of potential layoffs. I think you're seeing a number of states not signing up for Obamacare. So I think there's a ton of implications on this economy.
The Fed did something this week that it's never done before, and that is targeting an unemployment rate of 6.5% and tying it to low interest rates. That was a good idea in your view? You've never heard the Fed talk a specific number in terms of unemployment, where they're going.
Well, I think it's mixed, right? There's good news, bad news. The good news is the ability to borrow and certainly will help, the housing market. The bad news is, it doesn't give us much earning power on our savings. And what was concerning to me in that was that they were projecting maybe 2015 before we got to 6.5% unemployment. That is a devastating projection from my standpoint of millions of people unemployed, and then the number of people who are falling off the roll is not even looking for employment any longer. So this is all about job creation that drives GDP, that drives the revenue to get this engine going.
Right. And really, no matter what happens, we are going to see more austerity next year. I mean, that's pretty clear that we are going to see reduced government spending to some degree. Yeah. We may very well see higher taxes. What is your expectation of the economy in 2013 based on that, regardless of whether or not we go over the fiscal cliff?
Yeah. From a GDP standpoint, I think, again, unless things really change significantly, I think we're going to be lucky to get about a 2% GDP, in my opinion.
Tell me about your new firm, Bob, Accelerate. What are you hearing? What are you doing in terms of private equity? Where are the deals that you see happening in the coming year?
Well, I've been focused mostly on mid-cap businesses and a lot of family businesses. And it's amazing the number of family businesses now, Maria, that are anxiously trying to monetize a portion of their business in anticipation of a higher tax rate. And unfortunately, they're also reaching a cliff because there's only so much time to try and find a buyer and match them up with a seller. But there is an anxiety out there among these family-held businesses and privately held businesses that they're trying to get some cash off the table.
Sure, and they want to get that 15% capital gains tax as opposed to something that's much higher next year. That's what we're seeing selling
exactly
in the market. Let's talk about autos for a moment. You used to run Chrysler. You have a great sense of what's going on in the auto industry. And we got word this week that we're looking at the auto industry on pace for the best year in the last 5 years. Do you think we're actually seeing a real recovery in autos? What's going on there?
I do, and I couldn't be happier, particularly for all my close friends and colleagues at Chrysler, to see the hard work we put in place during that transitional period really pay off in the form of, we had to make some really gut-wrenching decisions on cost. We put a number of new products in the pipeline that are, resulting in tremendous margin for Chrysler. I think financially they're on the road to recovery. It's interesting, they're kind of financially bailing Fiat out at this time. So I'm very excited about the auto industry.
Bob, great to have you on the program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. Bob Nardelli here in the studio. Up next on the Wall Street Journal Report, the conservative who says January 1st's fiscal cliff deadline isn't the end. Oh no, it's just the beginning of the fight. Anti-tax activist Grover Norquist on the road ahead for the Republicans and the economy. Later, do artists make the best business people, and how creative thinking can help you design the career of your dreams? As we take a break, take a look at how the stock market ended the week. We'll be right back. Welcome back. With 2 weeks left before year end, the looming fiscal cliff, automatic spending cuts and tax increases set to go into effect January 1 is stoking concern from Washington to Wall Street. My next guest has been a key figure in the debate. He is Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. And Grover, it's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Maria.
So since 1986, Republicans have been signing your taxpayer protection pledge. As we get closer to the fiscal cliff scenario, will some of the people who signed on to no new taxes have to concede and agree to revenue increases in the forms of higher tax rates?
Well, obviously, the president is trying to drive in that direction. The Republicans have some leverage as well. 2 years ago, Obama said he didn't want to hurt the economy, so he didn't want to raise rates on anyone. Evidently, now that his job is secure, he's less interested in everybody else's job, so he is interested in raising top rates, capital gains taxes, subchapter S corporation taxes, although that's going to be awfully rough on the economy if he pulls the trigger on that. There are also a series of fights where Republicans have more leverage than they do early January. That is the debt ceiling, and there the Republicans have announced ahead of time that the Boehner rule remains in place. If Obama wants $1 trillion in debt ceiling increase, and he's planning on having $8 trillion in higher debt over the next decade, he has to pay for it with spending cuts of equal amount. Republicans could also require that tax rates come down as part of a debt ceiling increase. A second tool that Republicans have and have employed against Obama is the continuing resolution.
Yeah.
Because the Democrats in the Senate haven't passed a budget in 3-4 years, we have a CR, a continuing resolution. If that isn't continued March, April, the government has no money to spend.
Well, what about tax increases and the impact on the economy? Is it really that big of an impact? I mean, you know, what about giving in on something just to get a deal done so we don't have this crisis of going over the cliff?
Well, what we're trying to do is make the economy better, not worse. And we're going to be living through 4 years of the Obamacare, $1 trillion of Obamacare taxes coming this next decade. All of the regulations that the EPA and others have been hiding until after the election. Those $150 billion of those starting to bite before the year ends now, after the election to before the year ends. Massive regulatory burden hitting. We need to not do more damage to the economy, and raising the capital gains tax has always hurt the economy. Raising the dividend tax is going to be very bad for the economy. Raising the taxes on subchapter S corporations is going to be damaging to the economy. We need to stop Obama from doing more damage to the economy, and that means not letting him raise those taxes.
Well, I do agree that the capital gains and the dividend taxes probably have a much bigger impact than the ordinary income tax increase, because that will put a limit to the amount of stock people buy and investments that they make. So I am with you there. But what about the president saying, look, I have a mandate, okay? I was elected.
Well, of course, the president has to remember that 86% of the TV ads that were run on his behalf in this last election were explaining that Romney will give you cancer and was a man of low moral character. These were not ads celebrating tax increases and spending too much money. So he won a mandate not to be Romney. Okay, for 4 years he doesn't have to be Romney. But he did not get a mandate to continue spending and to raise taxes on the American people. He never talked about the Obamacare taxes that will be taking place in January. Matter of fact, he avoided talking about those. And, of course, the Republicans won a majority of the House. And they did vote for a budget that reformed entitlements, cut marginal tax rates, that did the Ryan plan. Everybody in the Republican House has twice voted for the Ryan plan. The president's never even written a budget that brings the budget into balance and reforms entitlement, never mind voting for it. So he can't claim a mandate for some secret plan which he didn't advertise, and which all of his budgets that he does talk about, the kind of spending restraint he wants credit for is $1 trillion for not occupying Iraq for the next decade.
Right.
They kicked him out of the country. That's not a real budget cut, Mr. President.
All right. Well, what do you think this debate, though, means for the future of the Republican Party? You know, part of me feels like, you know, there's a stripe of extremism on both sides. But another part of me feels like this election was about abortion. It was about gay marriage. It was about the social issues that the extreme right in the Republican Party gets in the way of those centrists, those people who are maybe, you know, economically conservative, but socially liberal.
Well, it was an effort by the Democrats and by Obama to talk about everything except the economy. And if you're looking at the lousy job numbers they have, the lousy recovery, and the lower standard of living, it was wise of them to talk about sex instead of about jobs. And the Republicans did not do a good enough job focusing and keeping the focus on economic growth, the missing economic growth of the 4 Obama years.
All right, we'll be watching that. Grover, good to have you on the program. Thanks very much.
Hey, good to be with you.
We'll see you soon. Grover Norquist joining us. Up next on the Wall Street Journal Report, is an art degree more valuable than an MBA? How to get ahead, stay ahead, and find the best careers in your changing job market. We cut to the art of the deal next. And I hope you'll look for us on Facebook, Facebook/Maria Bartiromo. We're back in a moment. Welcome. So here's a question. Do artists make better business people? In today's rapidly changing job environment, creative thinking is one of the skills in highest demand. Robert Safian is the editor of Fast Company magazine, and Peter Barna is the provost of Pratt Institute in New York. And it's good to have you both on the program.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. So, Bob, you've written a lot about the emerging generation of business leaders, and you call them Generation Flux.
Yes.
What does that mean? What do you think are the skill sets or the personality traits that are most important for success in this new normal?
Well, and Generation Flux describes the kinds of people who are best equipped to thrive in a time where things are changing at a pace that is a breakthrough. You know, we have not had a pace of change like this in our business world in a long time. And I think it requires a different kind of adaptability and flexibility. A lot of business has been built around efficiency. Technology has helped us become more efficient. Efficiency is important, but adaptability and flexibility will be increasingly important as you try to adapt to the model shifts that are going on around us.
That's a great point. Adaptability is so critical. So, Peter, business school applicants right now, I mean, they're down, right? For the fourth year in a row, you've got students seeking masters of fine arts degrees. That's moving up in numbers. Are we entering an environment where MFAs are worth more than MBAs? What's going on?
Well, I think that two things. One, a creative training, which is adaptable, and you're solving problems that you may not even know they exist yet. In that kind of environment, the longevity of a career is much longer. In other words, you learn a process for approaching problems, not necessarily the optimization, but approaching the problems, and that's a very important part of it. And I think that students are recognizing that that the adaptability will be a part of their careers. They're likely not to spend an entire career with a single company, but doing a range of things.
How do you prepare for that?
You give them a lot of problems that are not prescriptively defined, meaning that they have to find the problem, find where the sweet spot is, and then create alternative solutions to those kinds of things. And so a lot of it has to do with you're not going in a linear way from A to B, but you're learning to find your way in unknown territory and be very comfortable with that.
So let me ask you, what is the opportunity for creative thinkers then? Question for you both. I know Pratt Institute is celebrating its 125th anniversary this year. Some of your alumni have had incredible success in the business world. So what are the opportunities that some people may not expect, Bob?
Well, I think to some extent our definitions of careers are outdated. We're still looking for a world where there's sort of a ladder that we move up to, that the next job is clear. You know, instead of having multiple jobs in a career, we're going to have multiple careers in multiple industries over our lifetime. And the kinds of jobs that you're going to succeed in are much more, there's a CEO who used a term with me, FIO jobs. All the jobs she's hiring for are FIO jobs, which are figure-it-out jobs. I don't know exactly what the answer is what she's saying. I need to have people who have the skills and are open to trying to find new models of ways to figure it out. And that's really what, you know, what is happening at the design schools, is teaching a different way of thinking about how to adapt to prototyping through ideas as opposed to applying models.
What do you think, Pete?
Absolutely. And it's being comfortable with not quite knowing where you're going, but watching it as it evolves, as what you're doing evolves, seeing people's reactions to it, iterating it, changing it, being very comfortable with flux. I think is the word.
We talk about uncertainty and ambiguity, right? Uncertainty is you roll a dice and it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Right? And you can try to model that out as to what the answer is going to be. Ambiguity is, I don't even know if it's a die. I don't know how many numbers are. Are there numbers? Are there colors? What are they? And when you have those kinds of questions to answer, you have to have a different kind of training, a different way of thinking about it.
So do you think this creates innovators?
Go ahead.
Well, I think we need innovators, and I think in some ways we're following where the companies are going. You think of two companies. Think of Barnes & Noble. This is a retail company, right, that has gone into the consumer electronics business with the Nook. You have Apple, that's a consumer electronics company that's disrupted the retail business with the Apple stores and iTunes and the app stores. What are they? What do we define them as? You know, our definitions have broken down, and we need people who can see beyond the traditional ways of thinking about them to break down and find the innovations that can take them to new places.
And you think we're educating them to do that?
I think we are. I mean, one of the things that has happened is interesting, the comparison between an MFA and an MBA. What it did is it allowed us who run programs around MFAs to examine what we do and why we do it in contrast, and to clarify, I think, what are the attributes. And one of the things we've recognized is that entrepreneurship does not necessarily have to mean creating your own business or headed to your own IPO, but the companies need people who act entrepreneurially inside the corporation.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff. Great to have you on the program. Peter, Bob, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time tonight, and we'll see you soon. Up next on the Wall Street Journal Report, we'll take a look at the news this upcoming week that will have an impact on your money. And then what had you talking, searching, and shopping in 2012? Tech giant Google's year in review. Back in a moment. We have some big news to tell you about. Beginning in January, we'll have a new name for the program. Look for On the Money with Maria Bartiromo. We'll have some exciting new segments for you, great guests, and of course, I'll be here as well. Hope you will be there. Here's a look at the stories coming up in the week ahead that may move the markets and impact your money this week. Oracle, FedEx, Nike, and BlackBerry maker RIM all reporting third quarter earnings. By the way, RIM stock has been on fire recently ahead of the new device coming out. Wednesday, we'll find out how many residential units began construction last month with the latest housing starts figures. Thursday, the busiest day of the year for UPS worldwide. Some 28 million holiday deliveries are expected on Thursday. Also Thursday, we'll get the third and final revision of the third quarter gross domestic product, typically a market mover. And then on Friday, the latest figures in personal income and spending will be out, as well as monthly consumer sentiment. Well, what were 2012's hot searches? Google released its annual Zeitgeist. The list is capturing the mood and spirit of the United States this year. According to what we were searching for and talking about and looking for, top trending stock searches in 2012 were for Facebook, Zynga, Yelp, Samsung, and Arena Pharmaceuticals, which develops anti-obesity drugs. Interesting. And when hunger strikes, the most searched food companies were Costco, Pizza Hut, Domino's, Papa John's, Food Network, and Weight Watchers, proving those who dance eventually pay the fiddler. That'll do it for us for today. Thank you so much for being with me. Next week, we'll take a look at the hot holiday toys with Toys R Us CEO Jerry Storch. Hope you'll join us for that each week. Keep it right here where Wall Street meets Main Street. Have a great week, everybody. I'll see you again next weekend.